October 28th, 2025. Well, I want to discuss something that's a little bit out of the norm here, but a lot of the main things, are still ongoing. Of course, Trump's visit seems to be going spectacularly well in Asia, and we're still in the shutdown and all that sort of thing. And so, but something's come up that's sort of notable to me, right? Is that a new movie by Kathleen Bigelow called A House of Dynamite, which is showing on Netflix. At least that's and so. And of course, I'm always into these kind of geopolitical things and stuff like that. Anyhow, so kind of my subject, and certainly this subject. I mean, I've been involved in quite a bit, and of course, previously, Annie Jacobson came out with a book called Nuclear War, a scenario, and I've actually done a video on that, which I guess I should put a link to that one there too if anybody's interested in how I kind of address that book, both the good and the bad. And this movie is sort of falls in that category too. I mean, of course, we know her from previous works such as The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, of course, which kind of gave it. And then going back, I still remember. I think she was the one that did the Strange Days, I believe, also back in the '90s, right? So anyhow, the essential premise of this is that somebody from in the Pacific side launches a single nuclear missile, presumably maybe even with a single warhead. That's not specified, heading toward a major American city. Well, we find that out as the show develops, and it's basically it's kind of almost a procedural show. It sort of goes through the procedures that are involved in such an incident, and in that sense, I think it's pretty positive. It illustrates how this is handled in general, in terms of who gets together, that they use all the a conference call between the Stratcom guy, the NORAD guy, the White House Situation Room, and even our friend the president, if he can be found. Of course, in this show, it turns out the president was at a kind of a public campaign rally type event or some type when this all hits, and the national security advisor was out taking his kid to the I think it was. A daycare center or something. In other words, all these people were kind of where they'd be normally. This is totally not this is not instigated by a crisis. It just happens, which in itself sort of suggests implausibility, of course. And of course, the fact that the Defense Support Satellite, the service satellite, actually failed to detect the launch. That's another one's kind of interesting. But anyhow, you get to see the process and how it works. And that part is pretty well depicted, I think, as good as you're going to do. Kind of interesting. And a lot of things I kind of noticed seem reminiscent, let's say. Uh, but like having to where the people had to store their smartphones outside. They can't take it in the skiff and so forth, which is the way it is. That kind of thing. So anyhow, at least not legally, right? But the thing is that then as this missile comes in, we do now have an active ballistic missile defense capability on the Pacific side, and we know what country it's really oriented toward. It's oriented toward North Korea, obviously. I mean, certainly the Russians could definitely penetrate that system easily, as could probably, in fact, they probably could even take it out with an Iskander missile, or a cruise missile that would go underneath the radar. It's not designed against them or the Chinese, it's designed against North Korea. But in this movie, we don't know who did it. We don't say it's North Korea. At any rate, maybe it isn't, huh? And so as this thing develops, we launch two interceptors. And Annie Jacobson's scenario, she launched four. But at any rate, they launched two. And one of them had a technical malfunction, and the kill vehicle didn't separate from the launch missile. But the other one did, but it missed. It didn't knock out the. So now the warhead is heading toward the target, and and I don't know if I guess as we get into this, there will be some spoilers. So if you really plan on watching it, and if the dramatic effect is your thing, I guess then well, this is not really the rest of the video will be for you. If you like these videos, please click give me a like, click the link for notification, and I mean for to subscribe, and you also follow me on Rumble, of course, if you prefer that one, because I post on both. So, at any rate, yeah, but I'm going to get into it. So, at any rate, it turns out that the Secretary of Defense's daughter is in. The target turns out to be Chicago as it develops, and why would North Korea want to bomb Chicago? I don't know. At any rate, especially at any rate, and so he's concerned about her, obviously, since he knows what's happening, and then you have, as I say, the president's still out of the loop. They had to grab him, and the show is formed in a way where it's in, I think, 3 parts, where you see first the Situation Room and that aspect of it, then you see another aspect, and you finally see the president's aspect, and so you like to see the Secretary of Defense and then the president. So, and so it kind of rewinds a couple of times rather than being totally linear. Something like the movie Dunkirk was done, if you saw that one. So anyhow, so now we've got this bomb coming in, and there's nothing we can do to stop it now. There's no time to really do much to protect anybody, and so it's going to happen. And so now we get into a situation, what are we going to do about it? And of course, the Stratcom commander, and here's where the show, in my opinion, goes completely off the rails. Because obviously, unlike something like Zero Dark 30, where at least it was a serious attempt to depict what happened, I'm not sure it was totally accurate, I'm sure there's issues, but it was trying to depict, I think, what was going on a lot. And this one, I think, is trying to send a message, which I think anybody in the right mind knows that nuclear war is something we don't want to do. And in fact, I think it's topical, not given the possibility of a fluke launch from the Pacific, but what's actually going today in the Russia-Ukraine war. That this thing could conceivably escalate for any number of reasons at some point in the future and lead to some kind of a real problem. And, an absolute disaster potentially, which is one of my themes on covering that conflict. But here we're going to, go into this. Now, as I say, here's where the thing unravels. The strategic command, the general in charge of strategic command, very unlike the one who was interviewed in the Annie Jacobson book, it seems to think that the answer to this whole problem is that Russia's really got to be behind it, and therefore we need to launch a preemptive, all-out attack on Russia's military capabilities, command and control. In other words, basically the first strike option. Probably, and so maybe not. Okay, you get the idea here. Why does he want to do? What's he talking about? We don't even know. He doesn't even know who launched the missiles yet. We don't know who's behind the attack, and he thinks escalating this in any event, even if it was Russia, to a full-scale nuclear war is the answer. For one thing, as a Situation Room develops, and he's in on the conference call, he knows that contacts have been made with the Russians, I think the Chinese too, that discusses the issue, and the Russians assure us that they're not behind it, and they're concerned what we're doing because they're seeing that we're going on alert and so forth. And they know what's happening. So if we did launch this first strike, a massive, we're talking, what he's talking about isn't explained, but I know what that is. That's what's called in the war plan a major attack option. Probably focused on the military primarily, and maybe withholding on the purely economic and civilian targets, except where the collateral damage is going to happen because you have to do it to get the military targets. I mean, you don't knock out the Russian Defense Ministry without dropping a nuke in the middle of Moscow, right? You see what I'm saying? So there will be a lot of civilian deaths in this thing, obviously, millions. But the point is, it's not designed to be necessarily a full-scale annihilation of the industrial capacity, let's say. But that's being held, obviously, in reserve for a follow-on attack, I guess. But the point I'm getting to here is, why does he want to do this? And what would happen if we did what he's suggesting, which what would happen then is they would obviously be fully prepared to detect the attack and launch under attack and retaliation. So basically, our missiles would probably fly past each other, and both sides would be essentially knocked out by the attack. And remember, in the situation, the attack on Chicago, our military has not been damaged at all. Our command and control and national leadership has not been damaged at all. So we have time to wait and investigate before we do anything. There's no need for an immediate action within the time frame that they're making. Now, I know what they're dragging to. They're going back to the idea in the full-scale war and the Cold War idea, the idea was that the attack would come in so fast that we'd have to respond within minutes. And that's still a real situation, of course. But here, it isn't that. We're pretty sure, if anybody's being objective, it's not a major attack from Russia. And if they do launch one, we'll be able to detect it and react to it, since everybody's now pretty much getting up to speed. Then another thing that's brought up here, which is really fascinating, I think, is that, but this is real, and is that the presidents in general, I think this is true of all, and this is not to knock any particular president. I think that most all of them were like this. They really have never really studied in detail the actual war plan. Yes, they've had a briefing on what their role is and an overview, but I don't think they ever get into it in the degree of detail where they would have an idea of what to do in a situation like this. So they become dependent on their military advisors, completely. And if they're off the beam like the one in this show is, well, you can see where it would go to. But in general, I think the real military people are not like that at all. I think they would want to keep the war limited, detect the real culprit and attack them. And that's another problem, of course. I'll briefly get into this too. I think that obviously it was North Korea. And here's the situation. To retaliate against North Korea, you have the problem that the missiles will be looking like they're heading toward Russia and China, or potentially could be interpreted that way. And depending on which weapons were used and how the counterattack was conducted, you can see how this could be incredibly destabilizing. And probably one of the worst things that's actually happened in the whole nuclear arms race has been the development of the North Korean nuclear arsenal. Yes, Israel has one. Yes, Pakistan has one. Yes, India has one. But none of those are likely to necessarily directly set off something like the North Korean one could do. And of course, North Korea being surrounded by China and Russia to the west, Russia to the north, Japan to the east, and South Korea, I guess, a little bit to the west also, and a little bit more to the south. You can see what I'm saying. The fallout from this would be going over allies and powerful potential opponents at the same time. And so it would have to be conducted fairly surgically with a lot of coordination. Yet I don't think you could just let them go by with shooting one missile, perhaps after another at the U.S. I mean, you'd have to do something. And that's why, there is something to be said for this, but that part of the issue was not brought out very clearly in the movie. And with the president being befuddled at the end, being in a state, this is completely insane, I don't know what to do, and having a lieutenant commander who carries his satchel with him with the attack codes, being his key final advisor on what he's going to do as he pulls out the biscuit and starts getting ready to issue his order as the show ends. Wow. Anyhow, so that's it in a nutshell, with spoilers and all. But I think, like I said, that it's good from the point of view of getting an idea of somewhat what the procedures and how this system about the system we have works. That part is really good and well done. But I think that the actual way that the decisions are made don't really make a lot of sense. And but I do think it does realize bring home the point that I think our leaders don't study this issue enough in order that if a crisis did develop, they would have an idea of what to do. And of course, at any rate, that's kind of my rundown of the show and what I think about it. Um, I made some comments on another YouTube video where the I guess it was the script writer was interviewed, and one person said, well, the Jacobson books, but it has its own problem. I'll put a link to my thing on Jacobson in the description below as well as of course I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and also I'll put my social media accounts below. So that'll be it for this time, and I hope this is interesting to you. I don't discourage anybody from watching it, but I think you should take a critical eye to some of the things that are going on. All for now.